For nearly 60 years, clients have returned to Jetcraft because of our proven results in aircraft sales, acquisitions and trades. Our team of experts span the globe, providing local insight for every stage of your transaction. We have one of the largest and most diverse inventories in the industry, and with our worldwide network and industry connections, we are the difference between getting an aircraft and getting your aircraft.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Corporate Jet Investor Town Hall. Thanks very much to Jetcraft for sponsoring this week. We're now delighted to have a whole 60 minutes focused on aircraft values. What will you have to pay if you want to jet now? We've got four fantastic guests: Richard Berkemeyer from Pegasus Aviation, Lisa Centers from Jet Centers Aviation, Chris Miller from Shearwater Aero Capital, and Tony Kiosis from Asset Insight. So let's try going to Richard Berkemeyer at Pegasus. Richard is an expert appraiser. He key part of the American Society of Appraisers education scheme. You can't become an ASA appraiser without meeting Rick at least 5 times. I think that's right, isn't it?
Well, Al, thanks so much for that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, thanks so much for coming on. Sorry, I think I lost you. How would you?
You're breaking up. Yeah.
How would you describe the market at the moment?
We had your one day last week. Actually, Tony and Jeff and some of the same folk. The available inventory is way down. And tomorrow. So what you see is now sort of the inventory that's out there is to point out, as I did last week, that Elvis's 1962 Lockheed, any of the inventory lists, but that plane is available. It does not have an engines. There's a bit of a rat problem and what have you, but it's certainly out there, and because of the shortage of aircraft.
And do you see any signs of it changing?
Al, I didn't hear that.
Hi, Rick. Sorry, I think, are you seeing any signs of it changing at the moment?
We might have to start audio.
Yeah, I'm just trying again now. Can you hear me now?
Missed it.
Okay, Hannah.
Pick
give
up.
me 1 second.
Yeah.
Hi, Rick. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Sorry, I think we've got the problem sorted. Do you see any signs of it changing?
Not in the near term. I work for a bunch of the banks. They're getting a few planes back, but the demand for those planes, people are sitting in. So I don't see that changing. I mean, we don't know how this virus thing will pan out. I do recall Kleenex and stuff and everything would be fine, but they're conceivably which might have some impact and the like. But no, I don't it changing. I think for the OEMs, it's kind of it's a good time because there's the charter operators were saying, look, you're not going to, if you want to go to Aspen at Christmas, buses or something like that, because all the charters are booked up. So, it's pretty good for all the industry players, with the exception of maybe some of the brokerage firms.
Okay, Rick, thanks so much. I think we're going to try and connect you again in a second, and let's try and go to Lisa Centers now, if that's okay, from Jet Centers Aviation. Lisa, can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes, I can hear you fine. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for coming on. It's always a relief that you can hear fine. How are you?
I'm fabulous. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. So you've got a long history in aviation. You've sold cards, you've sold fractional, you've advised on charter, you've sold whole aircraft. What are you seeing at the moment?
Well, as Richard was saying, we're at an all-time low. The inventory is really scarce. It's really difficult to get a newer plane, younger than 10 years old, I would say. And Amstat is saying that we're at an all-time low of about 5.4% across the board for used aircraft. So that's really pretty incredible. I guess it was the perfect storm, of COVID that led up to that.
And I think the point Rick was making is that a lot of those aircraft for sale are so old that that 5% includes a lot of aircraft that probably won't be sold.
Correct. Yeah.
So are you seeing aircraft going for asking price, or is it still or are we seeing people starting to pay a premium?
Actually, people are definitely paying a premium. People are arguing over the same planes. A lot of brokers are trying to get the same planes for their customer, because there just really isn't a lot of great inventory out there. And kind of scary, people are foregoing doing inspections and things like that to try to get the plane and bid the best. It's happening in housing. Also, people are just saying, I'll take it as is. So, obviously we don't recommend that, but people are doing that because they're just desperate to get the type of aircraft that they want, especially in the heavy jet category. I see that happening.
So if I'm out there and I'm a buyer, do I just go hard on the first aircraft I think might be good for me?
Well, I think it's really important to get a great broker. So, I think right now, more than ever before, it's you have to have a trusted advisor that knows what they're doing and has been in the industry for a couple of decades, or at least has those relationships. And then I think, you got to be ready to pull the trigger. Cash is king. And you can't vacillate, because it will be gone.
And we're seeing this across the board, aren't we? From charter to cards to fractional. It's not just whole aircraft that the demand's there for.
Oh, yeah. It's and in fact, I think Richard touched on it a little bit, but at NetJets now, it's pretty astounding. A new NetJets card owner is not allowed to fly on 45 different peak days. That's incredible. I mean, they've never really done that before. So now if you buy a new NetJets card, like he said, you can't go to Aspen at Christmas or Easter, 45 days is a lot of days to be blacked out when you're paying that type of money.
Although I guess you can supplement it with charter if you have to.
Oh, and most people do. Yeah, a lot of people have a NetJets card, and then they also use other companies on the side. I mean, for one thing, you can, I actually do that a lot for my clients. I can tell them you can use your NetJets card this time, or you can use charter and you'll save about 50%, depending on what the route is. If it's a round trip, same day, that's a great trip for charter. If it's a one-way to a crazy area, that's not such a great trip for charter. So yeah, but charter is at an all-time high too, and a premium. So people are paying a little bit more for that as well.
So we've got a question from Rick Berkemeyer is asking you a question. Are you going to your existing base to locate inventory, or are you shifting them to new aircraft? So are you going to existing customers or to find aircraft, or have you got other secrets?
So if I understand what he's saying, I spoke to a salesperson at Gulfstream yesterday, and it is good for the manufacturers, because people that would never have bought a new plane are going and purchasing new planes. So they're benefiting from the no inventory in the used jet, category. So was that the question he was asking, or is he asking something else?
I think he was going, are you finding your existing customers looking to sell as well?
Oh, I think people are holding on to their asset until they have another one. Very similar to what's going on in houses. A lot of people want to move, but they can't sell their house because there's no place to move. So that's part of the reason why there's a shortage in planes also, because people are holding on to their assets until they find one to sell, because it's obviously, a seller's market right now.
But as prices rise, you're going to see more and more people tempted to sell. Do you think this is going to last for 12 months or 6 months, the shortage, or do you see it longer?
It's difficult to say because it kind of depends on if the tax laws change. I mean, we have the perfect storm, right? We had low interest rates. We had COVID. So optics changed. There was no more flight shaming, at least temporarily, because people, didn't want to risk their health or their families. The people that were philanthropic that might never have flown privately before said, I'm doing it. In fact, I think 25%, the market increased by about 25% with first-time buyers. And I did a speech for Georgia Economics, and 97% of those people said that they were going to continue to fly private. So even if only half of them do, that's still going to create this lack of inventory. So I think it'll be a while, but I think it's going to have to slow down because there just, won't be anything to buy. And I think the market's expanded pretty much. We'll see what happens with COVID. If that continues to go away, I know Europe is still suffering more than the United States. And it will also depend on what the business travelers do as far as going commercial or not. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. I think it's hard to predict.
You've sold through tough markets and hot markets. How long do you think this one will last for? Do you think this will last for indefinitely, or does anything worry about it? Obviously, you've mentioned tax, but airlines are coming back strongly in the States. Do you think people will start going back to airlines when frequency returns? Do you have any worries, or do you think this is a next 2 or 3 years of hot market?
I think it might be the next year or two of hot market, but everything cycles and the pendulum always swings. So I believe it'll straighten itself out. I mean, the private aviation industry is set to become, I think I read a statistic, $30 billion industry by 2023, or, I don't know, it was compounding, every year. So I think we're all safe. We're not going anywhere.
And do you think, and one of the topics we covered last week at CGI Global, a lot of the brokers were saying it's just becoming harder and harder. It's hard to get a PPI, a post-purchase inspection done. It's harder to physically move an aircraft around. So do you see that just being the norm now for the next 6 months?
Yes, I think that will be occurring across the board. And, I keep using the analogy of a house, but we just purchased a house. We paid over asking price by a significant amount. We put an accelerator in the contract, so we won it because we paid the most. And now we're renovating it, and things that happen on a daily basis is, yesterday they pulled the insulation out, and we got a call this morning from the company saying 7 insulation trucks didn't show up. We're having a hard time getting the insulation. We'll let you know when we can do it. So it's the same in housing or in jets. I think we're in for a little bit of a rough road for maybe 6 months or a year.
And I think housing is a really good recommendation, because buying a house isn't very pleasant.
Yeah.
and buying a jet usually isn't either.
Yeah, true. But I mean, it's exciting when you're buying a jet, obviously, but with all of these hoops to go through, and then people are being outbid. And, there's a lot of turmoil in the broker industry right now, I believe, because you might have a jet that you've earmarked and you think you've got it, and another broker comes in and outbids you. That's happening a lot, which is kind of it's not a great situation.
Do you think now is a more frustrating time to be a broker than it was in 2010 when the market was awful?
That's a good question. I don't know. It's an exciting time because everything is changing. We talked a little bit about Wheels Up with the SPAC, and other things that happen with, JetEdge International doing that new management program. So I think it's a really exciting time. And I think I heard Steve Verasano say one time in a speech that you have to like be willing to like hang on and do the work and not quit. And I think it's just another way that you have to pivot and, recreate yourself or your company and think of new ways like JetEdge International just did.
Brilliant. Lisa, thanks. Actually, let me just check if we've got, we're having a few technical problems as usual. And I'm just checking if I've got any questions going through at the moment. I think we've got one asking about the reasons for low inventory. I think you've answered that really well. What's your final prediction for the end of the year? Is it December's usually the craziest month? Right.
Well, I read an article the other day that my good friend Amanda Applegate said that she had never had any, a busier time than last fourth quarter. And I think this fourth quarter might rival that if we can get some of the inventory back, or some people are, depending on what this administration does with the tax laws or, what the predictions on that. But I think we're going to have a busy year of it.
I've got a great question from Mike Francis. How are you advising customers who are willing to pay a premium? Are they aware that this bubble will burst? And do they care?
I think it depends on what the motivation for the purchase is and, how much disposable income they have. Because, as some of the people we were talking about, Al, before this call started, some people just don't, it's a luxury situation. So you can't logic the purchase. So I think that some people just are not going to care and they want to win and get the best. They want to get the jet. So they're not, and not everybody thinks the bubble's going to burst. So that's a whole nother topic that you can talk about. Some people just think it's going to keep going. So I think most people are just going to jump in and buy the jet.
Brilliant. Lisa, thanks so much for joining us.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for having us. I love corporate jet investor meetings, and I'm excited to go in November. So thanks so much for having us.
That's brilliant. We're looking forward to seeing you in Miami at the Fontainebleau. Thanks very much. Thanks, Lisa Centers from Jet Centers Aviation. We're now delighted to go to Chris Miller from Shearwater Aero Capital. Chris is a financier, very much asset-based financier. Chris looks at the metal and also is a certified appraiser. Chris, I like the new glasses.
Oh, thanks.
How are you?
Doing great. Doing great, Al.
So what do you think is going on in the market at the moment?
So I think when you take we take a bigger kind of global perspective, and the economies kind of drive things, and COVID has driven things. But when you take a look, and I'm a big proponent of baseline depreciation for aircraft, and we've been looking at this for the last couple months, and and just taking a 2015 or 16 model of a medium, mid cabin to a large cabin jet. The baseline depreciation over the last 5 years has been in the 9 to 12%, which I think is where it should be. And there's a little bit of a flattening out over the last several months due to COVID and the increased demand, like Lisa was talking about. I think Lisa kind of summarized that very well as far as the demand increase for COVID. It's not going to go into that. But that's not going to last forever. It'll kind of balance out. Who knows how long that will take? But what I think is going to be driving the aircraft prices, I think what we're going to see is a flattening out. Aircraft prices aren't going to be bouncing back for pre-owned. What's going to do is they're going to level out. They're not going to depreciate in that 9 to 12% range. They're probably going to be in that kind of 5% range. So the values will sustain. And what I think is going to happen, and what I really think is going to happen, especially talking to friends that work on Wall Street here, that there's going to be a market correction here in the U.S. within the next 12 to 18 months. I think just because of, not to turn this into a political thing, but with what's going on in, the 2022 elections, I think will be telling here in the U.S. And it's not that the U.S. drives the rest of the world, but with business jets, it can actually drive it more so than other things. So I think values of pre-owned business jets are going to depreciate less than their baseline in that 9 to 12 for the next 12 to 18 months. I think it's going to be there. And then, when that correction happens, and then, COVID is hopefully a little bit in the past of different countries across the globe. And I think you'll start seeing aircraft they'll start, depreciation. It'll be a correction in values. So if you're going to sell an aircraft, I would say try to sell it before the end of the year, or at least within the next, 8 to 10 months.
That's really interesting. So you're not forecasting an appreciation that we saw in 07, half of 08, where we saw aircraft trading above list price.
I don't see that because there's just a lot of factors that are keeping that from happening. And one is, I think that OEMs are a lot more disciplined right now. So they're not, part of what was happening, banks were just doing stupid loans on aircraft, and we're not seeing that just yet. Although here in the U.S., banks are being really competitive with really good credits, but that's kind of a normal thing. But it's nothing like 07. And there's not speculators in the order books of OEMs. They learned their lesson. So when you take a look at that, there's just a lot of the factors that were there in 07 are just not here. And also, aircraft aren't really overpriced right now. They're kind of where they should be. And you look at year-over-year pricing of new aircraft for business jets, it's not that back in 06 and 07 and 08, it was their year-over-year pricing for new business jets was increasing by as much as 12% for some aircraft, which is absolutely insane. And so we're not seeing that at all. There's a flattening of some OEMs. I think there's some models where the year-over-year pricing is a little bit less. It's hard to tell because it's not really advertised. So I don't think we're going to see a correction anywhere near 07 and 08.
And as an asset financier, are you worried that there won't be enough deals this year?
No, not really. I think over the last couple months, just the inquiries that we're getting for financing across the globe has dramatically increased. And during COVID, at the beginning of COVID, was a really busy time for us, for people that were needing quick liquidity for aircraft that they own just to pull cash out. And they were looking for things, but they were looking to go. It's just interesting. I ran into a couple clients that were just over leveraged, and they were looking to pull money out for margin calls. Back in April, and they're just going to the good jet, get it, just pull some money out real quickly. But we actually diversified into other kind of aviation assets and asset lending, which was been kind of a nice diversification for us. So.
That's brilliant. So your forecast for the year is good till the end of the year, but expect your aircraft to depreciate a bit more next year because nothing lasts forever.
Yeah, that would be it. That would be it. So, I mean, it can't. There's going to be a correction, and and who knows? It's a guess when it's going to be, but I believe it's going to be within the next 12 months, maybe 18. But I think if you take a look at the U.S. markets for the way that they're going, it'll be interesting. There is going to be a correction. How big of a one? Who knows? And how much it's going to affect business jets? I think it'll just put business jets back on that baseline depreciation. So there'll be a slight correction, and then I think it'll be in that 9 to 12%.
And so if you're watching today as a buyer, expect your jet to go down by 9 to 12% a year, and then you don't get a shock at the end when you're selling it.
Yeah. You're never going to get as much as you think you're going to get. So
it's true in life, Chris.
Yeah, that's true.
Thanks so much. Great to see you.
All right, you too. Thanks
so much. Chris Miller from Shearwater Aero Capital. And now delighted to turn to Anthony Kiosis from Asset Insight. Anthony needs no introduction, or Tony needs no introduction. Expert on aircraft values, aircraft maintenance. Asset Insight is an amazing database of pretty much every aircraft that's for sale and what maintenance is due on it. If you have any questions on maintenance, Tony is the man. How's that for the intro, Tony?
My gosh, I hope I can live up to half of that.
No pressure. It's all on you now.
Yeah, right.
And I've just seen a question for Chris from Mike Carman. that I'm going to let you answer as well at the end about G550s. But first, let's go through your slides.
Well, thanks, Al. Thanks for having me, by the way. Let me, Hannah, can you bring up the slides? There we go. Okay. That's interesting.
This is just one of those scary things where you can see us inside ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Click on PowerPoint at the bottom. On the PowerPoint.
All right, there we go. Now we're getting someplace. Right. Okay. I'm hoping you can see my screen.
Yeah, it's looking good. It's great.
Okay, great. First of all, the data. One of the things that I'm trying to do here is show using data what everybody's been talking about, and the data usually, and in this case, definitely lags what's going on in the marketplace. But we took a look at correlating the inventory and ask prices to see what was happening in the marketplace. And as you can see, from January to May of this year, there's a pretty high inverse correlation between pricing and availability, which is exactly what you would expect to see happen in the industry. If there's no availability, you would expect prices to start to increase, and a minus 78% correlation rate is pretty high. You can look and see, however, that all of last year the correlation was, although there was an inverse correlation, it was pretty low. And if you look at January of 2020 until today, the correlation's actually low and positive, which makes no sense. Which means in the last 5 months, you're actually seeing what everybody's describing on the marketplace about availability having an effect on pricing. Now, the reality is that it's the effect is not the same across the board. If we look at jets by groups, you can see that there's a very high correlation when it comes to large jets. At negative 89%. And there's some correlation when it comes to turboprops at nearly 30%, but that's not exactly thrilling. But if you look at mid-sized jets and light jets, there is no correlation there between availability and pricing. I mean, the prices just seem to follow. As availability increases, the prices seem to decrease. So it kind of varies by aircraft type. What's going on? Clearly, the large jet market is the price is reflecting the low availability in that arena, and I mean the availability is extremely low. We don't track all of the aircraft. We only track 134 models of aircraft, but we track the models that really do matter. And when you think about it, the availability on large jets is just pathetically low relative to newer and lower time aircraft. So the data is really just showing you what everybody's been talking about today, which is what's happening in the industry is the data is clearly showing it. Have I lost you?
No, I'm still here. Oh,
okay.
Sorry, I thought you had one more slide. That was my fault.
No, that was it.
So why isn't it working with because you look at the light jet inventory and there aren't that many light jets. CJ3s are like gold dust. A Phenom E, you'll be lucky to find one. Why aren't we seeing the correlation there, do you think?
Well, I think with some models, if we took it down to a model by model level, you'd see the correlation on certain models for sure. But when you look at some of the light jets and even some of the mid-sized jets, you're really talking about aircraft that are much older, and it has to do with the aircraft build standard in a lot of ways. I mean, they're just not, the aircraft are just not selling. They're not selling because their maintenance costs are out of whack with reality, with the value of the aircraft. That a lot of these aircraft have much higher fuel burn. And while people say, well, gas is pretty cheap today, well, we've seen that before, and we've also seen, gas prices spike. And then the last problem, although it's really not that significant with smaller, light jets and some of the mid-size models, but there is connectivity, an issue with connectivity. I mean, if you've got a Global and you have no connectivity on it, and you're trying to charter that aircraft, the only two words I can think of is good luck. It just doesn't work. So and it's not just connectivity. I mean, a lot of the technology is changing so quickly. Avionics age. The value of a new avionics fit goes to zero in 6 months, a year. I mean, that's how quickly new avionics are being introduced. The same thing with cabin connectivity. I mean, everything changes so quickly these days that if you don't have the latest and the greatest, you're just not able to compete in the marketplace. And I think that's the real problem with some of the smaller aircraft. I definitely believe that a lot of the smaller aircraft are with their final owner. I mean, you've got. I was looking at it the other day. We've got turboprops that are 70 years old.
How old? 70.
70. I mean, think about that for a second, okay? Why are these airplanes still flying? Now, they're not, a lot of these airplanes, or most of the ones that are in that era, are not flying in business aviation. But I mean, that's how old some of the airplanes that are out there have been flying. I saw a Jetstar a few months ago on the hangar, on the ramp at an airport, and thought to myself, there's a piece of history. I mean, there and all of these aircraft come into the statistical pool, and because of that, they skew the numbers, one way or another. But if you're looking at a really top-notch small aircraft, you're going to have a difficult time finding one that's low hours and young. It's just not they're just not very prevalent.
That's an astonishing when you think how old. Although Richard Berkemeyer is saying that B-52 will be 100 and still flying, but we don't cover those.
Yeah, well, that'll be re-engined 3 or 4 times.
So are we seeing, Tony? Are we seeing the quality of the inventory decline as well? A lot of people are telling me that the good ones are picked over very quickly.
Yeah, they've definitely been picked over. The quality of the inventory. If you look at the embedded maintenance expense that the inventory presently has, it's been rising fairly steadily for the last 12 months.
So this is basically your embedded inventory expense is really how much it's going to cost you to keep that plane flying. So when you've got aircraft coming up to checks in the future,
that's right. That's right. The amount of future maintenance that's already been that the aircraft has already accrued. The aircraft is listed for sale and it's flying perfectly well, but it's 3/4 of the way toward an overhaul. Well, if the overhaul costs $1 million, you've got $750,000 of embedded maintenance when you buy that aircraft. And there are aircraft today that are listed on the marketplace that the embedded maintenance is huge. I mean, it could be 4 times the value of the aircraft in some cases. It is not unusual to see embedded maintenance at more than 100% the value of the aircraft. And what you're seeing is the average days on market of the aircraft continuing to increase. Over the last 3 years, the days on market have increased 60%, actually 63%, but who's counting? They've gone from 240 days to something like 375 days, I think, something like that on average. Now, again, these are just the aircraft that we track, but when you think about some of the other stuff that's out there, the numbers are probably even worse. And so the airplanes that are accumulating that much time to raise the average number to that extent, considering that you've got a dearth of availability on newer aircraft. I mean, the numbers are, there are airplanes that have been listed for sale for over 1,000 days. Well, they're not going anywhere. I mean, someone just wants to buy a piece of history or, an antique if they're going to buy that airplane. And I don't know what they're going to do with it, to be honest with you. So it's sort of a tale of two types of airplanes these days. You've got the ones that are selling like hotcakes, and you've got the others that are just not going to move.
Okay, we've got a question from Mike Carman, which was for Chris. I saw something on one of the value pubs saying that in May 19 there were 22 G550s on the market, and now there are 25 G550s. It doesn't seem to wash with the tight supply narrative. Is this a situation where you have to drill down on the specifics of that market to get to the truth?
Well, I do think you have to drill down to the market to get to the truth. There's a lot of data sources out there, and the assumptions being made by some of the data sources are what you have to get into in order to understand what they're really telling you. That seems to me to be a very high number of G550s listed for sale, but I don't have a number off the top of my head. But the real question is, in what condition are those G550s? I'm not sure that they're in really bad shape by any stretch of the imagination, but you could easily move to a 650 if you could find one. And do a lot better. You can move to a G5 and do a lot better. I mean, the fact that someone's got an airplane listed for sale doesn't mean that it's a worthy buy. The other thing I keep telling people all the time, and some people listen way too late on this. There's a difference between a low price and good value. And if you can't figure out the good value, if you're just looking at the price, there's a good chance you're going to get hurt. There are some very inexpensive aircraft listed for sale out there, and there's a reason for it. You're going to pay for it one way or another. And so I urge caution. I heard Jay Messenger. He uses the word patience for his clients, and I think that's exactly the right word to use. Is patience, because you'll be able to find an aircraft. The question is, how quickly and in what condition, and you just can't jump at something just because it looks like it's a buy. In today's market, if something looks like a buy, there's a problem.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just, while we're talking, 29 aircraft listed on Amstas at the moment. But I was talking to Ken Reiki last week, who was saying that they're finding it hard finding G550s, and and even the supply from the OEMs when you're a key customer is also quite limited for the new ones. But it's an interesting question from Mike, and it also shows that I think there's individual markets where the rules things do look different, but you look out. I'm just checking for any other questions. That was a really good one. Great one from Terry Spruce. Tony, is it time to split the categories of each into ages? So you don't just have light jets, you have light jets under 10 years old, light jets over 10 years old, to give a better idea of comparisons.
Yeah, we've started to do that, actually. We've started to split the models, the categories on the turboprop side. Because you've got, especially on the King Airs, you've got aircraft there, and we split them at the year 2000. You've got the ones that were manufactured before 2000 and the ones after 2000. We think that is definitely going to be something to do going forward. We're trying to figure out exactly what the right way to do it is, because you don't want to, make the numbers look worse for any particular model. But I think we're getting to that point. Once these aircraft start crossing 25, 30, and now 40 years, and others, and we're talking about jets now. Some are approaching 50 years. I mean, give it a rest, people. I mean, that's just a flying museum. It's where is Mike Dwyer? I think he calls them Jurassic aircraft. I mean, you're really getting into arenas where you just, wait. I'm not even sure. I am not even sure you can get certain parts for some of these airplanes. I know for some of the interiors, you can't get the old parts anymore. So when something breaks in the interior, you sort of have to figure out how to fix it by rigging it.
I think you just find an antique dealer and get them to fix it. They can relaminate it, chisel a bit out for you. A good comment from Mike Francis. Some inventory's going so quick, you have to wonder what the true number for sale is, because many are gone the moment they're listed or aren't even listed. Comment from Ovi: we're working on, or have worked on, at least 3 550s which have changed hands. And Richard Marnie is saying, there were less than 600 G550s produced. So it was a big number. Wes Remain saying inventory quality is one of the primary issues within the G550 market. You have to look beyond the surface level availability. Many available aircraft are deal pending. And Lisa Centers is saying, Mike, some aircraft are going before they're listed. Final question then, Tony, from Rick Berkemeyer is agreeing with you. And he's saying aircraft used to have a life of 30 years. That's an economic life of 30 years. He now thinks it's 18 due to avionics and engines. What about you? Because that's a big decider if you're a bank or you're someone buying an older aircraft.
I think it's definitely gone down. I agree with Rick. It's definitely decreased. And again, it goes back to the fact that technology is just, the level of technology change is just accelerating to the nth degree. And, aircraft are just aging, not before their time, but they're aging faster. So can you keep an 18-year-old aircraft flying in a good condition by retrofitting the avionics and what have you? Yes, you can, but there's a cost associated with that. And does the bank want to take the risk on financing that aircraft, knowing that if they get it back, they might have a very difficult time, or a more difficult time, remarketing it, because people aren't going to buy the aircraft because of its avionics. They're going to look at what's the age and how many hours are on it, and move on before they look at detail. Not everyone, but a lot of people are. I think in today's market, if you're shopping for an aircraft and you're not using really experienced help, if you're not using a broker, an experienced broker, someone from IATA, I think you're just looking for a way to get yourself hurt. There is so much to buying an airplane, and the complexities are amazing. I mean, we see this stuff day in and day out when we analyze aircraft for people, and it just amazes me. What really amazes me is the guy that's never owned an airplane, who thinks he can buy it for himself, and then calls us after he's made the deal to find out what condition it's in.
It's a good way to learn.
Yeah, yeah. A friend of mine has a saying: "Stupidity should be painful," and in some cases, it probably is.
Okay, I said that was the last question, but we've got a few more comments, including one from David Crick, the man who never sleeps in Perth. It's now 11 o'clock his time. If aircraft are reduced to an 18-year life, why are so many that are over 20 years still transacting?
Well, some of it has to do with lack of availability, but also, I mean, there are some real workhorses out there that will continue transacting. I was looking at the sales last month, and G4s are still trading, actively trading, and the level of G4 availability is very low in the marketplace. So I mean, there are aircraft that people like. The cabins are the right size. The aircraft can perform the mission very well. Again, it's a case of getting down into the details. That doesn't mean that every other aircraft that's 40 years old is going to have the same opportunities. They're not.
No, that's great. We've got Richard Marnie's asking, hours are ramping due to leasing.
I don't think leasing is playing that big a role in today's marketplace, because I mean rates are just so low. I'm not so sure that the leverage that leasing provides, other than the fact that you can get rid of the asset and not worry about the risk, the depreciation risk. I'm not so sure that leasing really provides that much additional oomph to a deal.
Okay, and Ovi's saying it should be noted that maintenance and remodeling are taking longer than most new owners realise. Paints and parts are back ordered, which is exactly what Lisa was saying. It's just like buying a house. Chris's view on depreciation, I'm sure you agree with that 9 to 12% is a good guide, and that there's no such thing as a free lunch. Your aircraft might depreciate less this year, but don't expect it to go up forever. The idea of aircraft values going up is one that's been tested and flunked. We look at a 10% number. We think that's that's a reasonable number, but 9 to 12 is right. We tend to believe that over the long haul you're going to see 10% decrease, and you might have a lower decrease in for a short time period, but over time that's what you're going to average out to. There's just no free lunch. I mean, it's a depreciating asset. The aircraft age, as I said, in more ways than one. I've got an old, a little old sports car in my garage that I bought for a song, and now it's worth the square root of zero. I mean, so I've ended up with a 2-seater that I can drive on sunny days, but it's worth nothing if I want to resell it. And that's a great lesson there. Try to avoid the midlife crisis.
That's right. that was due to a midlife crisis, I guess.
And on that note, everything depreciates, and the last thing you want to do is end up with a panic bought aircraft in your garage.
That's right.
Thanks, Tony. Always a pleasure. Thanks so much to everyone for joining us. That was Tony Kiosis of Asset Insight. Thanks very much to Richard Berkemeyer of Pegasus, Lisa Centers of Jet Centers Aviation, Chris Miller of Shearwater Aero Capital, and Tony Kiosis of Asset Insight. Thanks very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Good evening.
For nearly 60 years, clients have returned to Jetcraft because of our proven results in aircraft sales, acquisitions and trades. Our team of experts span the globe, providing local insight for every stage of your transaction. We have one of the largest and most diverse inventories in the industry, and with our worldwide network and industry connections, we are the difference between getting an aircraft and getting your aircraft.